Yo, what's happening, my awesome mad lads? My name is Maddog, and welcome back to another Mad Theory episode, where today, it's another Sonic Prime theory, and this is going to be like a few short theories that I've actually been coming up with, just to finally finalize everything and what's been happening so far with Sonic Prime. And if it's possible, though, we might get to see new characters, a new story, involving with any more else that involves with other characters in this entire series of Sonic Prime. So without further ado, let's begin. I've been hearing a few theories about Sonic's character and how it actually implicates the fact that he's actually a villain. Well, yeah, so far it is true that Sonic actually was arrogant and overconfident due to the fact that he was focusing on winning and trying to stop Eggman. And by doing so, he shattered the Paradox Prison into 4 pieces, allowing him to travel through the Shadowverse. And unfortunately, that home actually didn't exist, as Shadow actually explains in the very first season ending. And that's the very tip of the iceberg. This one YouTube content creator actually says that due to Sonic's behavior and how he's always too overconfident with everything and doesn't seem to really care much of anything at this point in time. But then, of course, there is some character development within him that he then soon realizes what he's actually, what he's meant to do, and he's supposed to be a better friend. But in return, it's possible that we might actually get to see the true dark side of Sonic the Hedgehog. And that, my friend, is Scourge the Hedgehog. If you remember Scourge the Hedgehog from the Archie comics, then this is probably the guy for you. Scourge the Hedgehog is, well, first off, he was known as Anti-Sonic. But then afterwards, when he was going to use the Master Emerald to gain power, Knuckles' dad actually punched him off the Master Emerald, resulting to actually become green. Then rename him himself as Scourge the Hedgehog. Now, this would be pretty insane if Scourge was actually to be known as the true villain of the entire series. It's like the very dark reflection of Sonic to the person that he's actually become, and then starting to realize what he has actually gotten himself into, and now he needs to redeem himself into becoming into being a better friend. And that way of doing that would also probably have to involve with defeating Scourge the Hedgehog. Or there could even be another darker version of Sonic. And that, my friends, could possibly be Dark Super Sonic. Now, first off, it's kind of weird that I bring this up, but you know Dark Super Sonic from Sonic X, right? I mean, really, he was only been there for like a few seconds when we get to see him in action. However, if you do remember the very first episode that Sonic fought against Eggman, well, technically Eggman's robot, he was never inside the robot, because Eggman used Sonic's speed against him, making cruel jokes about Tails, which actually allowed Sonic to get very triggered from that insult, resulting that in making the whole world shake. This blue aura just coming out of nowhere, kind of very familiar with the Sonic the Hedgehog movie 1 scene. They seem to be pretty similar. If those feelings continued on like that, then think about it this way. You know how there's always the 7 Chaos Emeralds to turn Supersonic? Well, what happens if he uses the negative energy of the Chaos Emeralds to turn into Dark Supersonic? Or unless if there's like a dimensional version of Dark Supersonic, but like more dark and more shattered and kind of like rainbow crystal colored, like the Paradox Prison perhaps. Now that would actually be pretty cool in my opinion. I mean, can you imagine a Sonic looking like that? And Sonic would have to fight that kind of reflection of himself. Now that would be pretty dope. I can whip up a drawing if you like, if you just hit that like button, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. So if you would like that, I'll do it. Now take a look at this interesting art over here that was for Sonic Prime. You see the 3 dimensions over here, the blue one, the green one, yellow, etc. But by taking a look at the blue one just very carefully, you can see this symbol that looks like Knuckles the Echidna. Now as we already know that the blue dimension actually represents the pirate dimension. And in this case, that Knuckles the Dread is actually the leader of the pirates. Also, surprisingly enough, we actually get to hear Captain Jack, which is basically Jacksepticeye's voice. Speaking of Jacksepticeye, is there any chances that you can actually get, like, freaking Irish the Hedgehog? Because that would be freaking cool. I would like to see some of that. Anyway, the symbol of Knuckles the Echidna being in this portal right here actually showed a few things. Because why was the symbol blue in the first place? I mean, the whole portal was blue, so was the symbol. I don't necessarily think it was actually going to be used for that. Well, at least not yet anyways. I mean, since that it's actually known as the Pirate Dimension so far, then I feel like we're probably going to get some very interesting other characters in the Pirate Dimension. One that I was thinking of specifically was Mimic the Octopus. Now, if you haven't heard of Mimic the Octopus, he's another comic character in one of the Sonic IDW comic issues. And due to the fact of his name is called Mimic, well, guess what? He can literally camouflage and change into other characters. Heroes, villains, all of it. He can literally transform and camouflage himself into any other character in the series. And that kind of makes sense. Since that Mimic is actually an octopus, he would probably fit very well into the pirate dimension. He's like the Kraken of the Pirates of the Caribbean, but as a Sonic version of it. If we take a look at Knuckles the Dread's hair for a good second, I mean, you can tell that it's actually very, and I mean very different compared to the other Knuckles so far in the series. It actually has that curvy, and yet it's very longer than how Knuckles would usually have his hair. In fact, now that I think of it, this actually looks a little bit more like Enerjack. Now, once again, Enerjack is actually another character from the Sonic comic series, and technically, he's like an evil version of Knuckles in some sort of way. Possibly, I feel like he could do something about its armor. You take a look at this very cool, shiny golden armor and with black clothing underneath it. It looks very threatening, and technically, this was actually its original design. It actually has a bit of blue underneath it instead, but this design makes a whole lot more sense, and it makes it a little bit more threatening. Maybe next time in the Pirate Dimension, they can also even add in Enerjack, but maybe the armor of Enerjack. And that while with it, probably Knuckles the Dread will be possessed by the spirit that is inside the armor, aka Enerjack, and would use that to try to destroy the world. Well, the pirate world in this case. We don't know about the rest of the other dimensions, though. Dimensional domination? Yeah, I could see that. Okay, now this part is going to be very interesting for what I'm about to talk about. If you remember Sonic and Nines traveling into the shattered space, and then Nines actually takes Sonic into this new dimension that seems pretty dull in a way. In this place, Nines actually calls it the Grim. The Grim is surprisingly, I mean, not so bad. I mean, it's got those pretty northern lights as you see. It's got that interesting prismatic stuff and interesting hexagonal shape rocks. But overall, there really doesn't seem to be much anything anywhere in this place. I mean, it doesn't seem like much at all. However, it could actually help the rebels in New York City to actually rebuild civilization there. A proper civilization, if you get what I mean. With the palm tree that the rebels have, it can actually probably regrow, and that means civilization will be reborn into a new Green Hill Zone. I feel like Tails could have actually a pretty good point there. This could be the rebels' new home. All they need is that palm tree, and then I feel like that the rest can move on from there for years to come. But there's also something else that I've noticed about those hexagons shaped like rocks, and also how there's actually hexagon shaped like portals are surrounding once you actually enter in the Grim. Why do I get the feeling this gives me, Phantom Ruby vibes? If you remember when I talked about Sonic Frontiers back then, I actually tried to shape up some of these shapes that have either hexagons or upside down triangles based on the shape of the Phantom Ruby. And in this case, well, all of these freaking rocks actually prove it. So, I don't know if this is a coincidence. I don't know if they wanted to, do this to feel like, it's got Phantom Ruby vibes just because it's got, like, hexagon-like shapes. But for the love of God, if they are thinking of putting, like, the Phantom Ruby into this, then they better have a good explanation. The excuse better be good and juicy. I don't know about Infinite. I highly doubt that's gonna happen. But anything involved with the Phantom Ruby, oh man, that's a bit of a stretch. But like, I understand why they just wanted to put like hexagons. But if they did that just to put it out there, or I feel like that the Phantom Ruby may be involved with Infinite perhaps. But again, I prefer to have the details to be good and juicy plus spicy. Better be a good excuse for that. Although the thing is, it doesn't technically look like null space. I mean, it has ground. It has like a rocky-like kind of ground. It does have rocks and the nice pretty lights for the decor, but other than that, nothing else I could say unless the rebels can actually go there and plant that palm tree there. Also, with the gear that Sonic actually had, his shoes actually turned into this silver gray-like kind of hexagonal-like pattern of shoes. And to be honest, we don't technically actually know though what kind of powers that this type of gear would give Sonic. Yeah. Unless if the Grim was actually home. Remember when Shadow actually said that home no longer exists in the ending of the first season? Maybe that's what that actually is. Now, we don't know what the Grim gear would actually help the Sonic. Maybe rebuild it or something like that. Or try to find some weird stuff to whatever the heck this gear would help him with. But for the rest of the other stuff, I have no idea. Another thing to also mention about Sonic talking about Shadow is like, I don't know what version of Shadow you are, but I just want to go home. Well, that's the other thing. Throughout most of those other dimensions that we've seen, there has been no other version of Shadow the Hedgehog at all. Just like how Sonic has been traveling to all the dimensions, there has been no other version of himself. Now I know I talked about Scourge earlier, or like a Dark Super Sonic, but who knows if that's gonna happen. But so far, there has been no other version of Sonic at this point in time. Neither is Shadow. There's always been a new version of Tails, Amy, Knuckles, Rouge, and also Big the Cat. Oh, and of course the Chaos Council. But has there gonna be a different version of Shadow also? Because we have seen nothing. There was like literally no other version of Shadow at all. So what can another dimensional version of Shadow even look like? Well, let's think it this way. First off, we do have the Shadow androids from Shadow the Hedgehog game. I mean, they could possibly be used in one of the Sonic Rifts. Maybe the yellow one, perhaps. And since that the yellow one makes a whole lot of sense, and since that one of the Shadow androids is like black and yellow as well, that's a good possible idea. What about Metal Sonic 3.0? He's actually Eggman Nega's creation, and due to the fact that his color is black and yellow, it would also make sense to have them in this dimension as well. You know what would actually be cooler? Having Metal Sonic 3.0 go to Neo Metal Sonic 3.0. That I would like to see. Or even crazier yet, even go Metal Madness 3.0 or Metal Overlord 3.0. Unless there's also, like, Super Neo Metal Sonic 3.0. Oh. Mate, that'll just be the top of the that'll be just, you know, the icing on the cake. Beautiful. Mwah. Chef kiss. Once again, I'm letting these kind of things open. But that's just one thing to keep in mind. Maybe a shadow that actually rules over the world, perhaps. Or even perhaps the new leader of the Black Arms. Not that quite sure if that's going to possibly happen, but hey, that's also a good idea. Or maybe a dimension though where he's actually not edgy. I mean, this Shadow in Sonic Prime is actually pretty good. He's not technically edgy at all, but he is kind of serious, and he always wants Sonic to actually, you know, to focus and keep your eye on the prize to stay in the game. But a Shadow that kind of acts like Sonic? I don't know. That would be interesting to see. It's like if Sonic and Shadow's changed personalities, and Sonic was more of Shadow, and Shadow was more of Sonic. Imagine that happening. That's probably like the most weirdest one out of the bunch, but again, I'm letting this kind of stuff open. It's possible. Once again, all these kind of things are endless. As long as it's actually done right. Alright, now this is the part where things are going to get a whole lot more fun. Now, out of everything that I talked about so far, what happens if there was actually more dimensions than we actually see already? Now, of course, we still need to see what the yellow one would do, but you can still keep on expanding that. What if there was an actual fanverse? Take a Five Nights at Freddy's, for example. How Scott Cawthon has actually allowed fans and players, fan-made games to actually be included as the Freddy Fazbear Fanverse. Literally making their own fan-made FNAF games however they want it, and if he accepts them, will be actually be put into the Freddy Fazbear Fanverse. This is that kind of thing that I feel like should actually happen in Sonic Prime. Do you imagine, like, every single villain or any other OC character that actually comes out in one of these Sonic fan games? Take the Sonic RPG, for example. How Silkadoom is the combination of Sonic and Shadow. Eon from Sonic Final Fantasy X. Nazo from the Project series Sonic Nazo Unleashed. Mecha Sonic, aka Metalix, in the Mario Bros. Z series. Now that's a freaking good one. Any other kind of fan-made project, or even perhaps like Lilac, or the Jolt, or the Lightning Jester. Games or shows that are fan-based projects such as these can actually be put into Sonic Prime. Oh, and how about take for Multiverse Sonic, for example? If you ever seen that channel, go ahead and check it out. That would totally make a whole lot of sense. Any of those kind of things will absolutely work magnificently if they ever decide to do a fan-made project version and putting fan-made Sonic games or shows into Sonic Prime. This can literally expand the overall fan base of Sonic the Hedgehog completely. Now, this is probably 100% an over-exaggeration thing, but I'm not technically over-exaggerating here. But this is like a whole wider imagination that I'm putting out there. Also to leave out there open. I've talked about like the comic characters. I've talked about like anything else that could possibly happen. But this could be the next level. Quite literally, actually. And to be honest, I feel like that'll be awesome. Anyways, what do you guys think? What do you think out of every single theory that I mentioned about so far is actually going to be possible to come out in Sonic Prime for the very future, for the upcoming seasons, or basically any new seasons that will come out for a new story arc? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I feel like that is finally the very end of my theories for Sonic Prime. I've enjoyed a lot of making these Sonic theories so far. It's good to actually get away from these, like FNAF, for example. However, I do want to come back to them, depending on how things go. But I am very happy. So please like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't, and click the notification bell to never miss a video. And as always, my name is Mad Dog, and let your days be mad and rad!